Coming up on this week's show, the Atari 400 mini games list is revealed.
Modders fix a Nintendo design flaw.
And we get the story of Domark and IDOS with co-founder Dominic Wheatley.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our wonderful mates at Bitmap Books. Now, have you seen From Ants to Zombies, 6 decades of video game horror? Now, this covers all the genres, from rail shooters to open-world RPGs, from haunted mansions to infested space stations. If you love horror video games, this is a must-read. You can check this out and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 416, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the podcast, a show that each and every Friday celebrates the world of classic video games. Now, today it's been all over my social media timeline. I shared this with you guys a bit earlier on that Sony, I think, have announced that the PlayStation 5 is kind of coming towards the end of its life.
Does that mean it's retro?
Yeah, well, that sounds ridiculous to me. I was looking at that thinking, I haven't finished playing with the PlayStation 1 yet.
They haven't even released GTA yet, you know.
We don't care about all that stuff, though. This is why, every week on the podcast, we celebrate the classic days of gaming, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, sometimes a bit earlier as well. Cover all kinds of stuff on the podcast. And, of course, it's been an amazing week for us because we've had so many people tagging us in social media posts, proudly wearing their Retro Hour t-shirts and showing off their audio cassette tapes and holding up their books, which have been arriving all around the world over the last couple of days.
It takes a while for those shipments to get across, doesn't it? I think we were waiting for it to hit America, and then we saw it hit New York first and started going around. Amiga Bill had one, but also Australia. So yes. It's literally on the opposite side of the world now, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, I think one landed in Canada this morning. We got tagged in the picture. So, for anyone that backed our Kickstarter that ran about a year ago, we did send all the UK and Ireland books out. Joe was busy packing those all over Christmas, went pretty much every night. We took carloads of them to the post office. I do mean it was about, 5 car journeys?
Yeah, between me and you, Dan, and Dan's wife and my wife driving to the post office because
the postman was going, not these guys.
Yeah, pretty much. It turned out Royal Mail for the UK was the best option for us, interestingly, which worked out quite well. And then our German printers actually distributed it for the rest of the world. Yeah, which is they got sent out a few weeks later, didn't they? And
I think they were 24th of January. I think they sent those out on. So they have been arriving now, though. But they did say it could be like 6 to 8 weeks. But I know there are some people. I'm getting messages every day. People going, "Where's my book? Where's my book?" They are out there. We've sent every copy out now. Apart from there is 18 books still outstanding from people who haven't filled in their Kickstarter survey. So I've tried to reach out to them.
If we're going into your junk mail, then hopefully we'll catch you on the podcast. And,
please do check it.
We can't deliver it without an address.
That is it. So if you're listening and you backed our Kickstarter for the book and you're thinking, mine hasn't turned up yet, please log into your Kickstarter and just double check you filled that survey in, because without your address, as Ravi said, it's a bit hard to post it. So, and thank you so much for all the love as well. I mean, I kind of feel like I don't know jinx things, but I've not seen a single bad comment about the book.
You've jinxed it.
I'm nervous now, Going to get a load of tweets and now it's crap. The love has been overwhelming. So thank you so much to everyone who's supported it, has, read it and has shared the love on the socials as well. So it's been an incredible year getting that book out there. I'm very, very proud of it. So I hope you enjoy it as well. Now, on the podcast this week, we have got an amazing guest. And I said to Ravi after we did this interview, because I always love it when we get the proper OG guys on the podcast.
And absolutely huge companies as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking British gaming companies, Domark, they were huge back in the 80s. Originally on the 8-bit platforms, they started with their first game, Eureka, that Ian Livingston actually wrote. He was an early investor in the company as well, of course, went on to the founder of Games Workshop. And then very early on, they had this interesting initiative on that game. And bearing in mind, I think this was about 1984, 85, that game came out. And they offered players a chance to win £25,000 if you finished the game. Which, you think for the time, that was incredible. Because, I mean, Dominic, who we're talking to this week, and his partner Mark, I mean, that's what Domark stands for. It's basically an amalgamation of Dominic and Mark. They both had a marketing background. So I think, compared to many other company heads that we've had on this podcast, a lot of which have backgrounds in programming, for example, I think their experience in marketing, which is where they came from, really had a different perspective, didn't it? And meant that they viewed the industry through a different lens back then.
When you're in video game publishing, it's all about getting those licenses and kind of getting those rights, packaging stuff correctly, and getting it in the right people's eyes. And this was a time before, they were in the retail stores en masse in the UK. So you're kind of taking a bit of a risk there as well. And Ocean were another huge company that had a lot of licenses as well, and we covered some great licenses in this. Championship Manager, which is one that people are still absolutely obsessed with. There was some Star Wars licensing as well. Domark were an absolutely huge company, and then they kind of turned into this beast with so many companies getting involved. And when they went public, they also did Tomb Raider. That's a pretty big game there. And we talk about the early days of Domark, how it started, getting some of the great licenses, the establishment of it, and then hitting Tomb Raider.
Yeah, I mean, how that company just absolutely spiraled. I mean, it blew up, didn't it? I mean, pretty much from coming out the gate, they were there with that first game, Eureka, that just got so much press coverage, and then there's huge licenses, converting all the Atari coin-ops as well, like you said, Championship Manager, and then, Tomb Raider, when that came along in the 90s, when they merged with IDOS, that reverse takeover. Fascinating story, and just incredible to get it from one of the founders of the company. So our special guest, proper industry legend, Dominic Wheatley, he's going to be coming up on the show in around half an hour from now. Now, you know the way the podcast works. If you're a regular listener, the first half of the show is when we like to do a little roundtable chat and bring you up to speed on all the big happenings in the world of retro from over the last 7 days. And this story just keeps on giving us more details. I mean, we've all been kind of hyped for the Atari 400 Mini, which is the next, I'll call it a mini console. It's really a mini computer though, isn't it? From Retro Games Limited and Atari in the US, I think, are releasing it over there. This is a system that's basically a modern mini recreation of the legendary Atari 400 computer. And I've said on the podcast, I'm very excited to get my hands on this. Obviously, you guys have heard a bit more about it since we started talking about it. You guys tempted by this system at all?
Yeah, if I kind of had the space in my house.
It's only a mini system, Ravi. It's only like the size of your phone.
Yeah, but still, it's plug sockets, it's all that kind of stuff.
Doesn't have to be set up constantly.
I was going to say, it's the weirdest excuse for not getting a system I think I've ever heard.
Ravi's sounding like an old man these days. But I know, I see what you're saying. If you're not going to play it and it's just going to sit there in the box and take up room, etc., I understand. And I'm probably in the same boat as Ravi. I'm probably not going to grab it, but I think that's just because of I haven't got any nostalgia for it.
Well, neither have I, but to me it's something that, because it's something I've never used before, and I've heard about, that's what intrigues me, I think. It's a platform I've never explored before.
Yeah, I understand that. And quite a few people on the Hangout, our monthly Hangout that we do with patrons, quite a few people were talking on there saying, they haven't played it and stuff, because obviously it was a lot bigger in America than it was in Europe. And, a few of our listeners were saying on there, they want to play it because they never have played it. They've never, seen one, or, they've only seen them at conventions and stuff. I know this isn't it's a recreation of one, etc. So I get that element of it as well, but it just, I don't know, it looks cool. I like the look of it and everything. Like, obviously it's super retro.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it a bit too old school for you, maybe?
Maybe.
Late 70s.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I mean, they've just, the reason we talked about it is announced the full lineup for the built-in games, and there's 25 of them, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, we won't go through them all because, like you said, there is a hell of 25. A lot of them on here.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is a few that kind of leap out to me. Battlezone, which of course, legendary game. You've got Boulder Dash on there as well, which, if I think of like those kind of classic Atari titles, that's one that stands out. We had Peter Leaper on the podcast, didn't we, Ravi?
Yeah.
Years ago. Centipede's on there, which, Centipede appears to be on, like, every single Atari collection. And same with Millipede, that's on there as well. You've got Miner, 2049 is on there too. Hover Bother, which is a very quirky maze game. Hoverbother, I've got a feeling that could be the Jeff Minter game I'm thinking of. Yeah, that came out.
The things that stand out to me on it is Star Raiders 2.
Yep, Star Raiders 2 is on there.
I'd love to play that and, experience that in a 720p, but also Mule as well, because I know it's got the 4-player input as well.
Yeah.
And, having a multiplayer title on there is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think, the thing is with these systems, I find it quite hard to get excited about the built-in games list. I mean, it was the same with the A500 Mini. I mean, yeah, there was few all right Amiga games on there, but the main appeal to this is, you can literally just download all the ROMs from the internet and whack it on a USB stick. So really the built-in games are kind of, irrelevant really.
That's the thing. I'm not massively excited because I've seen the games before everywhere else, and they've been put on quite a few times onto quite a few systems. And we've had the Atari 50th collection that's had a lot of the same software with it. But yeah, I get it, and people, obviously they're going to hack it. They're going to put all sorts in there, and it does look quite nice if you're into that. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing for me. I mean, I mentioned on the podcast last week that when I got my A500 Mini, first thing I did was try to get, the Amiga Workbench running on there. I can play all the games anyway, but I thought, can I get the operating system running on it? And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, to me, I kind of want to drop into can I get BASIC running on it and do some programming, that kind of thing. So I'd be interested to play around with it and kind of see if that is possible.
Do you think there's any obvious missing ones there that would be the big titles that would bring people in? I think they've got the lot there, really, haven't they?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not all that familiar with the Atari 400 library, which to me it's kind of a plus, because sometimes you go into a system and if you are a bit too aware of it, you kind of just gravitate to a few games.
It's like the MSX with me. I wouldn't know what I was doing there at all, but I'd enjoy it,
And sometimes you might find that you really like a game, and then you go into a website and suddenly you find out that actually the rest of the community thinks that game is dreadful. But you think, actually, I thought that was all right. I'll keep quiet about that.
But there's a few that I've heard people talking about and playing. Of course, I've played stuff like Millipede and Miner 2049 was meant to be kind of like a precursor to Manic Miner. I think it took a lot of influence from there.
Right.
Lee as well is meant to be really good, the martial arts one.
I think it is a nice little selection. Like I said, I'm not really knowledgeable about a lot of those games on there, apart from the ports of the Atari arcade titles. But I'm looking forward to kind of just exploring a system that I'm unfamiliar with, especially with that, because I love the Amiga, obviously, having that J minor heritage as well. And obviously I could emulate these, but I think having it on a mini system that's kind of has been tested, it's going to run them well. And also having that rewind and save state function we talked about a couple of weeks ago when we first had this announcement. I think for someone who's pretty crap at games like me, that'll be a welcome addition. So not long to wait. It is coming out next month, 28th of March, for $99.99 UK pounds, and pre-orders are available on Retro Games Limited's website. I'll link that up in the show notes. Now, Joe's always got his eye peeled for new Mega Drive games, and I've got to say, this one, which is launching on Kickstarter, yesterday at the time when this podcast comes out, but at the moment it's just in pre-order as we record this on Valentine's Day.
This looks...
Feeling loved up?
loved up for Rocket Panda.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, this is Rocket Panda coming to the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Genesis on physical cart, like say, launching later this week, but at the point of this show coming out, would have launched yesterday. Mm-hmm. Got my eye on this one. I really, really, really like the look of this.
It looks beautiful.
It does look beautiful. And it's coming to us, so it's being published and released by Mega Cat Studios, who have done quite a few of these now, who are wicked. And it's being developed by Space Pants Games, who are two guys, Julian Scott and Ben Everett, who are behind that, who have been in the industry for quite a while, from what I understand. And yeah, Rocket Panda, it's a classic 2D platformer, but you are flying around, essentially, as a panda with a jetpack. And graphically, it really does remind me. So I've checked it out, and, they are British, the guys who are making this.
Yeah.
The graphic style of it really reminds me of those kind of old school Codemaster, Dizzy and...
it reminds me of a bit RoboCod.
James Bond 3.
I was saying it. I was like, James, and then you said it. Yeah, RoboCod, James. It reminds me of James Pond 2, RoboCod. And even the music reminds me of that. And, that's real nostalgia for me, that is. So in terms of the gameplay, it's hard to describe. So you're kind of floating around the level.
Can I tell you the story of the game? Apparently you enter the thrilling world of Biscuit Land, and you have to save it from the clutches of the wicked Biscuit Head.
Nice. So, sounds like my wife, Biscuit Head.
Just wait for Joe to get a smack around the back of the head in a moment.
So, yeah, gameplay-wise, you are traversing the levels, kind of like dodging the obstacles, dodging the enemies and stuff. But then you have to rescue these little baby pandas from cages. So it kind of reminds me of kind of like James Pond meets Sonic 3D, you know, the flicker one where you've got to save the flickers and drop them off. That's what it reminds me of, but obviously with the 2D graphics. I really, really like the look of this, and I think I'm going to go ahead and back this because I'd love to have this in the collection and, you know, on physical cartridge on the Mega Drive as well. Be wicked and British developed and stuff. And it's the musically, watching the trailer to it, it's got that classic, the Biscuit Land makes sense. And it reminds me of James Pond too, you know, with the the levels which were based around the sweets and stuff, just the music in there and that classic Mega Drive like twang.
I don't know, it looks a bit snazzy to me.
Do you think?
Well. Yeah, just like the colours in there, but yeah.
It is colourful, but I don't know. I can't get my head away from James Pond.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of as well, especially because I mean,
Wonder Dog. I always
even that
Wonder
Biscuit
Dog
connection. Because I mean, you know, it was James Pond was sponsored by McVitie's Penguins, I think, wasn't it? Sponsored that game, so like maybe like Jammy Dodgers or something should sponsor this. Get that tie-in in there.
That's a good idea, actually. I like that.
It looks very nostalgic, though. I mean, this looks like a game that if you'd have told me this came out in like 92, 93, it looks like perfectly of that era, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That pure. It's not like, it's, you know, one of these late release Mega Drive games by like Treasure. I mean, there is some of the, you know, scrolling backgrounds and, you know, parallax scrolling and stuff like that. And some of the enemies have got that kind of pseudo Mode 7 look to them, which I guess is where Ravi says it looks a little bit Super Nintendo. But it 100% has that kind of like mid Mega Drive look to it, like 92, 93 look to it, I would say.
Yeah, so that is should be launched on Kickstarter by the time this podcast comes out on Friday. So if you want to back that and get a proper old school looking new game for your Mega Drive / Genesis, let's put that in the show notes as well. Now, I've got to say, when we talk about gaming television, it's always a little bit hit or miss, isn't it? I mean, there are some absolute classics, you know, Games Master, obviously, you know, Bad Influence, which I love. I know not everyone does love that show. Then you go to, you know, certain other ones like, obviously, Go 8-Bit, which, you know, we were all fans of Go 8-Bit. I thought it was a decent enough watch. You know, it wasn't as good as like something like Games Master for me, but I thought it was something I could sit down and watch for half an hour. I know that the community was very split on that, because I remember the big complaint, like, it's called 8-Bit, but they're playing like, you know, PlayStation 2 games.
And there was the Games Master comeback as well.
Yeah, which again I quite liked. I did quite like that comeback. This one is quite interesting because all those we mentioned there are kind of British, you know, gaming shows
as well was great. It's not a game show, but yeah.
well, apparently Atari are working on a video game celebrity game show that looks like it's going to be made in America, tentatively titled The Great Atari Celebrity Showdown. Must have taken them a long time to come up with that title. And apparently this is a couple of exec producers, Jay Blumenfield and Tony Marsh, who've apparently worked on shows like, I don't know if you've heard of any of these, The Chelsea Handler Show.
Nope.
Here Come the Newlyweds.
Nope.
Gigolos.
Nope.
Restaurant Stakeout.
Nope. And
Tournament of Laughs.
Oh, yeah. No.
Well, apparently they've got some pedigree if you're into that kind of show.
Yeah.
I imagine, like I said, particularly in America. But again, it just seems like, you know, Atari are apparently involved in this. You know, Wade Rosen, who is Atari's, I was going to call him new CEO, but he's been there a couple of years now. He's well behind this and apparently working with them. And apparently the idea of this is to be a bit of a walk down memory lane and celebrate the history of gaming, the culture of entertainment, and the joy of competing like we are kids, they're saying. So basically it's going to be the ultimate nostalgia hit.
I think it'll be simple challenges like they're not going to get people on and quiz them about Centipede and stuff.
It's not going to be like our Christmas quiz episodes where it's like, how many rows are in Space
Invaders? I watch a lot of these, I don't watch many of them, but, you know, you'll see something like I'm a Celebrity You'd be like, who's the celebrity here? Like, I don't recognise half the people in those shows. It's
usually descriptions act on some of those.
Shows, people from other reality shows and stuff that end up going on them. But I can see that maybe if they do like little challenges, so they'll just be like, oh, both compete on this round of asteroids or do something. But then it's weird because they've got like Roller Coaster Tycoon in there. So I don't know what the challenge is going to be because that's quite a long sit-down game. But they mentioned Roller Coaster Tycoon.
I wonder now you've said that because for me, I kind of read it and saw it as like a little bit more like, like our Christmas quiz, kind of like celebrities sat around and they've got to answer questions because obviously it's saying there's a rich pop culture of Atari for over 50 years now. And I get Atari is a lot bigger it was a lot more influential in America than it ever was, in the UK. So my mind went straight to, they're going to be answering questions and stuff. But then Ravi mentioning that, I think it might go a step further. I don't think they'll be playing the games. I think it might be like,
You're inside the game. Like, the hole in the wall one.
Like, do you remember It's a Knockout?
Yeah.
With like the giant,
I like that show. I thought
with the giant like inflatables and everything like that. I've got a feeling it might be a little bit more like that. Like, this next game is asteroids, but they have to like dodge like giant boulder asteroids, like Takeshi's Castle.
Guy dressed up as a centipede and
I'd probably watch something like that. I'd be much more inclined to watch that with some like Z-list, celebrities. I can't imagine, Will Smith or Tom Cruise on it. But maybe some of some of these kind of like reality stars and stuff.
I think I'd rather just watch a TV show about the history of Atari.
Where
they did like a dramatic recreation of it, but that's my taste. But I think if anybody's going to do this, it's going to be Atari, isn't it? Because they're doing so much at the moment, and they're branding so much that we'll see. But I haven't got my hopes out for this because I haven't watched Gigolos. So
yeah, well, there's your job this weekend, Ravi. Catch up with Gigolos. Report back next week. So, details are very scant at the moment, but apparently they are hard at work on coming up with this. So we'll keep an eye out for it and obviously give you our review as and when we see it. So if you want to check out that article, I'll link that in the show notes as well. Now, did you guys know that apparently the Nintendo Entertainment System has had a flaw for 39 years?
Flaw? Tell me more.
Tell me more about this flaw. Well, apparently some NES modders have fixed this problem with the original NES. And this is caused by what is called the Zero Insertion Force Cartridge Connector. I think that's the name of it. Now, this is obviously, if you've got an original NES, you'll know that the way it works is you pop open the little cover on the front, slide your cart in, and it kind of goes in, then you press it down. Mm-hmm. Which I've no idea really why that was the design of it. In my mind, I'm just thinking maybe it was to kind of be a bit similar to a front-loading video recorder.
I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain it was because of the video game crash when they brought it over to America.
Yeah,
they wanted it to look less like a games console and more like a toy.
Yeah,
or a VHS player. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and the reason it was initially packaged with Rob the Robot and stuff like that. Because it was to avoid the look of it being a video game console. And I'm fairly certain as well, you can play it without pushing it down. I'm pretty sure it will play as well if you just put it in and put the on button. I need to test that later on. I could be making that up.
Well, because it's saying that obviously when you have a traditional cartridge slot, for example, like one on a Super Nintendo or a Mega Drive, when you push the cartridge down, it goes into a standard connector.
There we go.
It cleans the pins a bit, doesn't it? Because obviously any grime or whatever is going to kind of get scrubbed, I suppose, when you're inserting and removing the cartridges. However, they're saying that with the original Zero Insertion Force cartridge connector on the NES, it kind of lacked that element, allowing dirt and grime and stuff to build up on it. Then obviously there is a problem which is known as the blinking light fault. Which generally what you do then is you take the cartridge out, give it a damn good blow, which everyone always advises against. Everyone's always done it for like 40 years. I've never seen a problem with doing that. I was playing my Super Nintendo the other day because, we've been playing some games for the after hours. My EverDrive wouldn't work actually on it, so I took it out, give it a good blow, put it in, worked perfectly after that. But they're saying that basically, that was a reason that a lot of people did that to blow the cart and blow some of the dirt out that had accumulated on there. But now there is a solution, and this is called the Nintendo Draw. Now, looking at this, you might think it's just a basic kind of 72-pin connector. That means you can just shove the cartridge straight in. But they reckon that the way this works is it essentially creates a straight shot straight to the cartridge slot without it going down.
Right. Okay.
So there have been a few of these over the years. There's one called the Blinking Light Win that came out a few years back now. But they're saying there is a few other tricks on here as well that basically make it a lot more reliable. Okay. So there are some beta testers that are testing this out at the moment. No word on pricing from what I've seen so far, but looking through some of the comments on the tweets, there have been some people that have, it kind of feels like the camp's kind of split into two separate people. There is some people saying that they've never had a problem with the original design of the NES, and I've got to say I kind of probably more fall into that category. That, when I have had a cartridge not work, take it out, give it a blow, put it back in, it pretty much works 99% of the time. But then there is a video actually linked up that it's not the best film video I've ever seen, but it's on a channel called Games Done Legit, where he's actually made his own mod that means you don't have to buy any of these kind of additional modifications for your NES, some of which can be quite expensive apparently. But basically he shows you that there is a routine for cleaning the console's pins on here and also lifting the pins of the 72-pin connector on there that means they will connect better with game cartridges. And basically he just kind of opens it up, gives it a clean with some Brasso and rubbing alcohol as well, and raises the pins up so they're always going to connect with the cartridges. So it looks like, if you're willing to open your NES and, play around with it yourself and do a bit of DIY, you can do it yourself. But I imagine with this Nintendo Draw, it is going to be something that just kind of slots in.
Yeah, these things over time, they kind of get damaged. Like I remember the RAM chips on my Amiga 4000. The little plastic clips broke on those and I had to get them replaced and taken out and then, get the board kind of cleaned up and get a better connector in there.
I just feel like it's such a heavy mod to it. Like, it looks, the little video of it here that they've got, obviously it's a heavily modded NES because they've put a clear shell on it. So you can see, so you can see what's happening. And it looks so alien to not see it get pushed down.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because it fits and everything, fine. But it just, it's way beyond anything I'd be able to do.
Well, I've got a feeling looking at this, I think all you do is you open the NES case, you kind of put this in the slot and then close it back up again. I don't think it needs any soldering or anything like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's basically just a cartridge port extender, really.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
I thought it was like a full on. Okay, that's pretty easy. You just take the top off, connect it to the...
Yeah, or maybe even just shove it in. Maybe you don't have to take the top off actually looking at it. It might just shove straight in the slot. But basically, I guess it's, it's less wear and tear on the actual cartridge slot that's already in there. But yeah, it's, like I said, maybe there is a massive problem with it, but I've always been fine just, I know it's not advised. Give the cart a little blow, put it in. Generally works for me, so I probably won't be investing in this. But if you do want to get one, they are looking for beta testers now, so you could offer your services. Now, just one more story before we get into our interview this week with an absolute legend of the industry, Domark founder, IDOS as well, Dominic Wheatley. He's coming up on the podcast in just a minute. Some good news if you are a PC gamer of a certain vintage, like our Mr. Abbott. Maybe someone who hates DRM, like our Mr. Abbott. You might be pleased about this news, that apparently classic games on the PC that came on optical disc that were protected by a certain form of DRM called Safe Disk have now been broken from their shackles. So what does this mean? And what was Safe Disk? I guess that was just like a copy protection that was on like CD-ROM and DVD games?
It was like an old copy protection. You'd have kind of secure ROM as well. That was another one. And people used to bypass it back in the days. But what it would essentially do was it would do a digital fingerprint that was connected to the machine on a driver, or it would do a number, basically assign a number to the disk. Using that with your old school CD-ROMs and everything, that's like fine back in the days with your old machine because it would still go, the CD's in there, and it would communicate. But there's basically been a problem, and the problem is that SafeDisk no longer works on modern versions of Windows. And that's because there's like a vulnerability in the driver. So, when you like run something on the modern Windows and you get so many warnings and you get like told off for running any old school stuff, which a lot of us do all the time.
This will break your PC.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to go, yes, okay, I know what I'm doing. Yes, all of this on the kind of warnings. Well, SafeDisk, they just totally locked it off. Like they were like, yeah, you're not going to be able to use this. And you may think, oh, stuff's available on GOG or there's ways to do this. With some PC games, there's not. Sometimes you need the original disc and you need to sit there, put it in and boot it up, and you can't do that.
Or you might just want to use your original copy and not buy it again. There's something that really bugs me that, when I've got a game in my library and I'm like, how many times have I bought that on digital as well? And it's like, I've already paid for that game so many times.
Yeah. So basically, a new piece of software has been developed, which is called SafeDisk Shim. And since 2015, you've not been able to use SafeDisk on Windows. And a few people were doing like sketchy stuff, which was kind of replacing the driver with another driver, but that also caused like security problems and risks as well. So instead of replacing the driver, this enables you to have that protection, but it intercepts the communication requests sent to the driver. So it goes in the middle of it and it shims it, which shim is basically opening a lock, hacking a lock, shimming it open. Right. So that's what this is kind of doing. It's getting in there and it's going, you can use your old games again. And it's weird as well because it's like you're actually using a piece of software to enable some kind of DRM in your system.
Which is because, I imagine when this got cut off, looking at the article and a few of the comments, people are like, well, I just got a crack for the game, which, completely defeats the object of having DRM in the first place if you've got to crack the game to actually play it past a certain point.
But I can imagine places like, I don't know, museums that want to play stuff, or like if you have a rare collection, like I've got 68 PC games in a cupboard just around the corner, and some of them aren't online,
And even some of these games, they're not even rare titles. Stuff like Call of Duty 4 apparently had their SafeDisk on there, the physical release on the PC. Age of Empires did. Prince of Persia, Assassin's Creed, the original one, Morrowind. So, there's quite a lot of games that apparently, if you've got them in your collection, are now basically playable on modern PCs easily without a workaround.
Without me having to lug my Windows XP machine out of the cupboard, yeah.
You've got that permanently set up anyway, Ravi, what you're talking
about.
I know. So, could be some good news there if you've got a classic PC or DVD collection, you want to play them on your modern system. So, if you want to read more about that, I'll link that up. And of course, the rest of the stories, you don't have to Google around. I save you the job every week by putting them in the podcast show notes, so you can head to the website at theretrohour.com. Right then, Dominic Wheatley, getting the story of Domark and IDOS coming up in just a moment. Before that, let's take a second to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor, and it is a regular sponsor of the Retro Hour podcast. It's a sound that we love to hear. It's our friends at Shopify. And that sound is a sound of making money on Shopify. You hear that when you've made another sale. Now, if you're not familiar with Shopify, they are the all-in-one commerce platform. Start, run, and grow your business. Because you know what it feels like at the moment? Everyone's got a bit of a side hustle going, or maybe even becoming their own boss as well. Maybe you want to do that. You're hearing it a lot. Maybe that's your plan in 2024. And Shopify basically takes all the hassle out of doing it. It is the commerce platform that's revolutionizing millions of businesses all around the world. And, Joe, we're talking about it. You mentioned that you've been to a lot of retro gaming markets over the last few months. Seen these little card readers, these Shopify readers that loads of traders have got now.
Yeah, video game markets. I went to a Christmas market with my wife over Christmas. They're absolutely wicked to have. And I think, kind of like where these markets are going and market stores and stuff like that, it is the future to have these little handheld card
No one carries cash now, do they?
Not too much, unfortunately. But yeah, no, they're really, really useful for it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're selling in person, you know, they do shop-ready point-of-sale systems. They also do an e-commerce platform as well. Shopify can even get you selling across social media marketplaces, you know, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok as well. Industry-leading tools designed to ignite your growth and give you complete control over your business. Good thing is as well, you don't have to learn any new skills. No design, no coding knowledge needed or anything like that. And they've got award-winning help and are ready to support your success every step of the way. So if you're thinking it's time to get serious about selling, get Shopify today. And they'll be there to empower you and give you the confidence to take your business to the next level. So if you want to try this out, and why not, we've got you an incredible offer. We've got this for just £1 a month trial period of Shopify. So all you have to do is head to this website right now, open a new tab in your browser, type in shopify.co.uk/retro hour, all lowercase. Use our exclusive link so they know that we sent you. Really helps out the podcast. Shopify.co.uk/retro hour, and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot of this. Okay, then keep it here. We have got the story of a true iconic British software company, talking about some legendary titles as well. Everything from Trivial Pursuit to James Bond to Star Wars to Lara Croft. All of that coming up with Domark's co-founder, Dominic Wheatley. He's next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest, and it is an absolute privilege to have a true pioneer of the gaming industry, the co-founder of the iconic Domark, on the podcast this week. Obviously, classic games like Eureka to legendary licenses like James Bond and Star Wars. Obviously, going to be some Tomb Raider talk as well. Let's welcome on our guest this week, Dominic Wheatley. How's it going, Dominic?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I'm delighted to be here talking with you.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to share some Domark memories with us. And one thing we always like to do with our guests, just to kind of get a bit of background, is because I know you've kind of got quite maybe a different background to a lot of our guests who, you know, were passionate about computer programming, for example. I know you kind of entered the industry in quite a different route. So I'm just kind of interested in how that started for you, what your first computing or gaming experience was, what kind of happened there.
Well, my journey has started off fairly circuitously. I was actually a soldier. But when I left school, and I joined, as my father would refer to it as the Brigade of Guards, now called Household Division, became an young Irish Guards officer, went to Sandhurst, of course, and did some time out in various jungles of Central America and other exciting escapades. And then short service commission, so I left after, I suppose I did 4 years in total. And I joined an advertising agency because that was my first love, was really marketing. And I've always enjoyed watching ads and reading ads. And I loved this sort of, the theoretical selling. You know, if you're at a car showroom and you're a car salesman, you have the customer in front of you. If you're not, if you are doing it in a print ad, in a newspaper or a magazine, how do you communicate the message across to persuade someone to actually want to drive a Volvo or a Ford or whatever? And I thought that was absolutely just up my street. And it sort of still is in a way. But anyway, that was why I did this. I joined an ad agency called Clark Beaver Hill. And I was a junior account executive. And I did 2 years there. Now, of course, in the officers' mess, we used to play video games. Even in the bars in Paris, I would play Breakout and Space Invaders and things like that when I was on holiday. So I've always enjoyed playing games, but as a sort of consumer, and I never thought of going into that as a business or a profession. But what changed was that in Christmas '83, I saw my brother had come home, back to family home, and he bought a Commodore 64. And I'd never seen one of these before. And he was playing a game called Heroes of Khan. And what I thought was so exciting and different about it was that instead of sort of wiggling a joystick and shooting, Space Invaders, it was a text-based sort of adventure game. So you type in, kill the dwarf, and it would say, you killed the dwarf, and now the gate is open, the valleys are, and there's a little sort of graphic came up, not frankly good graphic or something, and I just couldn't believe it. I thought, this is amazing, because up to that point, and I know some of your listeners are probably rather younger than I, but I mean, computers were things that were in finance departments, they're nowhere else. And so I was like, wow, this is extraordinary. So I took that idea away, and I thought that I would go and pitch maybe Commodore or, of course, Sinclair and win the advertising account. That was the germ of my interest in the video games industry, computer games industry.
That's fascinating. Yeah, like I said, a very unique entry into the industry there. And I mean, before we get into the founding of Domark, I mean, I imagine the name Domark is an amalgamation of, Dominic and Mark, who was your co-founder, Mark Strachan. So how did you meet Mark then? Did he work at the agency with you?
He did indeed. I mean, bear in mind, I'm 24 years old. I know nobody, and I don't know much about anything, right? And I didn't have a lot of business experience. I didn't have a lot of mates who were experienced. But I knew Mark, of course, because we worked together in this little agency. And we were the same age, and we got on well. And I had taken in the new year the idea of trying to win a client in this newfangled, home computer world, back to the agency. And I actually walked upstairs to the office of Terry Boubert of Clark Boubert Hill, who's a lovely man, absolutely fantastic guy. And I went up and I was going to talk to him about this idea. And I opened the door and he looked up at me. I can see it now. He looked up at me from his desk and I looked at him and I just suddenly went, no. So I said, Terry, I'm going to come back to you. And I walked back down the stairs and I was thinking, wait a minute, no. I think I could do this. I could start a company making these games. So I grabbed Mark and I said, pub now. And we were in Farringdon, a little square, Clerkenwell Green. And we went down to the pub and I said excitedly, listen, I've got this idea. And I explained it. And I said, would you like to join me? And he said, yes, of course. And that was the origin of Dominic and Mark, Domark. Yeah, exactly.
Did you have any idea of which departments were needed and how this company was going to work when you founded it?
No. I mean, apart from this sort of the obvious of, we've got to find someone to make a game and we've got to, market it and sell it, we didn't really have too much of a clue about setting up a publishing business. It was effectively a one horse company, right? There was this game which we came up with, Eureka. And of course, actually, if you think about it, what was the defining part of Eureka? Well, there were two defining bits. One was that it was a prize of £25,000 for the first person who found the secret code, which, to be honest, was loosely based upon Masquerade, right? The Kit Williams, I think it's Kit Williams, book at the time, which was very popular. Find that it was a golden hair that he buried somewhere in an English field, and if you managed to work out the coordinates, you could dig it up. So it was an amalgamation of that. And of course, we were introduced to Ian Livingstone by a fellow called David Bishop, who's a mutual sort of friend of ours. And we thought, well, if we get Ian to sort of, author the script, then you've got that famous author piece, it'll be a good fun adventure game. Oh, and you might win a prize. And if you think about it, given that we were two advertising guys, we were marketing guys, it kind of makes sense that we came at it from a marketing angle, right? This is why we had this prize. That was our idea. It was really more of a marketing play than a sort of pure video game play, and that's where it came from. So actually, we didn't think about we're gonna build this company's gonna have 5 games a year coming out, and no, we didn't. We just thought, let's do this one thing, see how it goes.
Well, I know that game really put, Domark initially on the map. I mean, obviously every kid in, every bedroom around the country wants to win £25,000. And I imagine they spent a lot of time So I think the way it worked is they completed the game and then there was a phone number at the end. And then they could call that for a chance to win. So, how did you go about marketing that then?
Well, first of all, just to be precise, we were pretty diligent about our plan. We did have a whole business plan and we did follow it exactly. We thought it all through. We followed it. The phone number was sort of buried and nobody was supposed to know, one of the programmers who made the game buried it at some part of the game. It was actually eventually found. That was buried in there. And the number was wired to a specific line, which was then wired into an answer machine at the house of our lawyer. Okay? So whoever, at whatever time of day or night, managed to find this thing, the idea was that they ring the number would say, "Hello, well done, you found it. Please leave your name and number and we'll get back to you." And then the lawyer would check the answer machine every day to see if anybody had rung in on it. It was a one dedicated line. And then, of course, when eventually it did happen, he was able to ring back and say, "Yes, well done, come and see us." So it was all kind of carefully thought through. But when it came to the marketing piece, we were just like traditional marketing guys. So we were advertising in the Sunday Times. And we were advertising in these sort of computer magazines that were pretty fanzines, really, and we did leaflets. We did leaflets, and we did leaflet drops in certain areas, and stuff like that. It was all fairly sort of standard marketing stuff, and in particular, of course, we hired a PR agency. And they got us a lot of coverage in the Sunday Times and the Daily Mail and all that, And it was very much in the mid-'80s, sort of Thatcher's era of entrepreneurship and so on. It was very much, two young guys starting a company and very exciting, and it's all in computer games, and so it wasn't hard to get the coverage in the dailies, and that sort of did put us absolutely in that. Nobody else was really doing it. But here's the thing which changed from the beginning of our planning and all the way through to the launch. It went from being a mail order only business to becoming a retail business in the sort of 10 months from start to finish. It really was extraordinary. So everything that we planned was based upon mail order. Like get here's the coupon, fill it in, credit card number, send it in the envelope, and then we'll send you a game and a cassette.
Yeah.
Actually, we sold about 3,000 in the end that way. In the summer of '84, suddenly we saw Boots and W.H. Smith's started stocking games serviced by people like Centresoft and Leisuresoft came up. And then you had the independent retailers, the mom and pop stores, which were popping up everywhere, right? Selling Commodore 64s and Sinclairs, but also selling all the games in these little stores. And of course, they were supplied by Micro Dealer, which was this little distribution company for small independent stores. So suddenly we found ourselves kind of, coming through August, September, we're heading for a November launch. And we're like, oh my God, now everybody's stocking them in the stores. We're going to have to find out who the buyers are, and we have to go visit them.
Did you initially have some reservations about the home computer market and how it would actually go before it exploded? And was it kind of seen as a bit of a risky move? And also, did anybody actually win that prize as well?
Yeah. Okay. So the first question, no, I had absolutely no doubt, right, that it was going to grow and grow and grow, and for all sorts of reasons. And it wasn't just about video games, but actually you could tell that people were starting to use them as word processors. Yes, they were sort of doing calculus on. There were other applications that were starting to come through. So I was never concerned that these things wouldn't get. I mean, when we were raising money, I had potential investors looking at the plan saying to me, "This is a skateboard. It's going to be over by Christmas." And I'm like, no. This is going to be massive, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. So I had no doubt about that at all. In terms of who won the prize, well, it was a fellow called Matthew Woodley. Now, Matthew was about 15 years old, and he had been playing the game, day and night. And he finally found the number and rang it. So one of the fears that we had was that somebody would find it too soon, right? And it would all be over, the third day, and that would kill sales. Yeah. So we were like, it can't be won too quickly. But equally, we didn't not want it to be won. We did isolate the money in an escrow account specifically for the purpose. Because in those days, maybe it is now, if you did offer a prize as an incentive to purchase something, you had to ring fence that prize by law. Okay. So we actually had it legally kind of put into a little escrow account, and it could only be used for the purpose of a prize winner, right? Which meant that, if today no one had ever won that, actually I don't know about today, but for years, if no one claimed it, it would still have to sit in that bank account just in case somebody picked up an old copy and got an old Commodore out and suddenly, 10 years later rang the number. So it was gone anyway, right? The money was gone. So we kind of wanted it to be one, but we didn't want to bid one too soon. And I think I'm going to say it must have been at least 6 months or so, or more. I'm trying to remember when Matthew rang the answer machine at our lawyer's office, and bingo, he rang us up and said, "Hey, we got a winner." And Matthew's 15 years old. And by the way, 25,000 quid in those days. I mean, you could buy a house. And I think he put it to good use. I think he invested wisely. He then, of course, used to come and hang out with us, right? So he'd hang out in the office in Putney, and we couldn't sort of shake him off really. He went to university, and I have a feeling we may have contributed in some way to his fees. I was used on the podcast. We could tell us. I think we made some contribution to his fees because the idea was when he finished university, he would come back and work for us, which he did. So. When he left uni, he came and he went to the marketing department, and he grew his career with us for quite a few years, and then he joined Sega and he became head of marketing at Sega, and I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I have a few years ago I did. I think he's gone freelance, but he's become a very senior executive in the video games industry.
It sounds like that £25,000 was a very good investment in Matthew then. It's it sounds like you went on to do well after.
Amazing.
And obviously for Domark, I mean, it got your press coverage as well, and it felt, looking at kind of the game history, your gameography of that era, it feels like, suddenly you became a really well-known company in the media because, you won a huge license next. You actually got to produce a video game based on James Bond.
Well, okay, so when we embarked on Eureka, we thought it was either going to sell a huge amount and we'd become incredibly wealthy, and our shareholders as well, because we had to raise money, or it would be a bust and we just go back. And funnily enough, White Collins Rutherford Scott, like I mentioned before, the ad agency that was sort of sat above our agency, when they first heard that we were thinking of going off and doing this thing, we were summoned to their very magnificent penthouse sort of suite at the top of the building in Drury Lane where they had the big agency. And there were 4 guys, all in Armani, all looking frightfully cool and sitting on sofas. And we did our pitch. And they kind of, look, they were kind of yeah. And we went back down in the lift with the finance director. And as we're going down the lift, again, I can see this, playback in video. And John McKinney, and he goes, the guys would like to put £25,000 in. And we were like, well, that's great. And it's like, the other thing is, if it doesn't work, and you have to close the business, they'd like you to come back and work for them. We're like, oh my God, what sort of investor is that? Like, you lose their money and they give you a job. I mean, it's like, oh my God. That's real style, isn't it? And I thought, gosh, these guys are great. So of course, we obviously had to go raise all this money. We had to put it down the black and see whether it worked, right? And what happened was not what we were expecting. It neither was a huge success, nor was it a disaster. It was kind of in between. We sort of got all our money back, plus some, right? And now we're going, what do we do? Okay, because we have no other ideas. This was our idea, and then we were going to, no, wait a minute, oh my God, we're going to do. So, again, being marketing orientated, right? I'm sitting down with my thinking cap on and going, well, I don't know that much about, making games. And of course, we played loads of games, but we didn't read. So I'm like, oh my God, how about we make a game based upon something? And there was a James Bond movie called The Living Daylights, which had been mooted as coming out the following year. It was, I think it was Roger Moore's last one. So I found the agent responsible, a guy called Derek Coy at Danjak, and I went to see him. He's an older guy. And we had a very emotional lunch. So Mark and I took him out for lunch, and he would be in his 60s, right? And we were like in mid-20s. And it was bizarre because we're having our little lunch, and we do like a nice bottle of wine. So we're having wine. We're probably on our second or possibly even the third bottle with this dude. So, we're all becoming quite sort of merry. Then he goes to this thing and he goes, are your fathers proud of you, right? And we're like, yeah, I guess, proud that you're starting a business and you're going. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And then he bursts into tears. And we're like, whoa. He said, my father would never proud of me. I've done so well. My father was never proud of me. And so we had this whole dump, we were like therapists for like the rest of the lunch. But as a result, we won the rights to James Bond because he fell in love with us. And so we got the rights to James Bond, and we got a team of people, and I can't remember who it was. I'm sure they're scattered now, but a team of guys to do a game. It was a pretty dreadful game, I have to confess. But it was a game, and it did have James Bond on the front, and it did sell extremely well. And of course, it was the start of many licenses that we then published.
Well, another huge license was a Trivial Pursuit, and we all know there's a great connection between board games and video games. What was it like getting that? Because nearly every household probably had a copy of Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah, so at this point, okay, we've done James Bond. I think we did a game called Gladiator, which was a homegrown game, which did okay, but not great. And we're starting to run out of money. So we went to the bank. And we said, look, we've got this idea, at Lloyd's Bank, actually, in Pall Mall, and a fellow called Neil Money, a great name for a bank manager, Neil Money, all right? He probably Neil Oliver, probably, so he probably N-O Money, Anyway, this guy was a great guy, absolutely fantastic guy. We went to see him. We said, look, we've got this idea, but we're going to need £250,000 to do it. And he kind of, for some reason, he gave us the money. So I found Horn Abbott, the agents for Horn Abbott, who were the guys. There was two brothers. I think there are two Abbotts and one Horn. I think these three men. I guess they were quite young men. Had in the United States. They were penniless people, absolutely penniless. They lived in some terrible shack. And it was near a beach or something. They used to comb the beach and pick up bottles and tins and things and take them to the store and get 25 cents for every bottle they gave in order that they could actually sort of buy Coca-Cola. So they were dirt poor, but they did love board games, and they had these board games they would play all day long. They were sort of beach bumps, really. And then one day they said, we should make our own board game because we love board games. If we made our own board game, maybe we could market it and da-da-da-da-da. So one thing led to another. They came up with this idea, a game based on of course, questions and particular categories and subjects and so on, and the rest is history. And they went to a lawyer. The lawyer put in half the money to help them get to it. And they made 5,000 copies, which they sold in their local town to stores and maybe a few local towns. And, it just took off, bang. The next thing you know, they sold it, I think, to Parker Brothers. And they made literally tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds. And this, again, in the 80s, when millions of pounds, meant something. And now it's a 2 up, 2 down in Battersea, but in those days, it was real money. And oh my God, they made a fortune from this thing, and that was the whole start of Trivial Pursuit. So we come along, we go, okay, we can do a computer version of this. And interestingly, Leisure Genius, which was a brand that was bought by Virgin Games, right? Leisure Genius was Scrabble, Monopoly. Oh God, something else. I mean, a few other games, and it was very much a board game brand, okay, Leisure Genius. And they didn't pick it up because they couldn't see how it could be made into a computer game, right? But we had a vision for this. And I failed to remember exactly how we ended up with Oxford Digital Enterprises, but there was a little company of game makers in Oxford. They were students, actually. David Pringle was the boss, and he put it together. He was actually a nuclear physicist. I mean, it sounds incredible, but he really was top nuclear physicist. And he was a lecturer at the University of Oxford, and he had this kind of group of about 4 or 5 young guys who made games for people. It was just very embryonic. We somehow came across them, and we said, well, can you do it? And sure enough, for money, they did it. And we go every week, we go down to Oxford with crates of beer, and we'd sit with these guys 6 o'clock in the evening and discuss how the game was getting on and look at it and come up with ideas. We really had to put our all into it because we borrowed this money from the bank to do it, okay? And, well, inch by inch by inch, we got there. And of course, the rest is history because that sold millions of copies, not least through the book club associates.
Yeah, I mean, having sold that many units, I mean, how did that change the company then? And did it change the culture at all at Domark?
Well, it did. It put us on the map, and it gave us a ton of dough, right? So we didn't say anything, but the very first check we got was £250,000. And it was from the book club associates. Anne Dixon ran the book club associates. And in those days, you're paid by a check. It wasn't transferred electronically. So we got this check, and we asked to visit the bank, Neil Money. And at this point, by the way, Neil was starting to really bob. I think he felt that maybe he'd done something really stupid, and we were going to default on the loan, and he was going to lose his job. So we said we need to come and see you. He's very, very serious, just to wind him up. And he's like panicking. He's like panicking at this stage, right? So we march into Lloyd's Bank at the Pall Mall, and you can see he's like, the colour is draining from his face, and he sits down, and we're looking very sort of like sad and sheepish, and we go, oh God, Neil, you've got something to tell you, and it's really, really, really bad. And he's like, oh, God, no. And then we pull out this check from BCA, we put it on his desk, and we go, boom, no more overdraft. And there's plenty more to come. And literally the guy, oh, you God, he literally leaned back in his chair, and his eyes closed. He was like, oh my God. Oh,
loosening his tie.
It was absolutely incredible. Yeah, it was such fun. And we, of course, had booked a fabulous restaurant, the West End, and we said, come on, out to lunch now. And we went out and got pash. And it was just great fun. And what a wonderful guy he was. And, of course, more checks came in as we went along because, of course, the micro dealer and, of course, the Leisuresoft and Centresoft, all these checks were pouring in, and it was just fantastic. So we were high on the hot. We went and we rented, or we moved office from a little garret, which was like some shit place, and we moved to a much better office. So it did indeed put us on the map. And then of course we carried on with more licenses.
Yeah, speaking of huge licenses, Domark got the license for games based on Star Wars, and it was a huge brand at the time, and you started a partnership with Atari. How did that partnership start then?
Okay, so, well, now, if you recall, there used to be a sort of a computer games section at the CES, Consumer Electronics Show, in Vegas in January, and it would be in Chicago in June. And everybody used to go there, but now we didn't have, actually, we didn't want to send both of us there. So I went on my own to Vegas in January of probably 87, I think now. And I'm meeting this guy called Manlio Allegra, right? And he's the agent for all the arcade coin-op companies, which in those days was a very, very big deal. There was Namco and Capcom, of course, and you had and you had certainly Atari, and you had all these big kind of brands, and they had arcade machines in these malls and other areas and so on. It was quite big business. And what Ocean and US Gold and Elite, actually, had another game publisher in those days, had started to do was to get the licenses from these very well-known and popular coin-ops and turn them into home computer versions, okay? And we're now moving into the sort of the Atari, ST, and Amiga era. So we think, God, we should be doing this. Well, we've done some other licenses, but we thought, gosh, we ought to try and get into this area. So I fixed a meeting with Manu. Now, Manu represented all these dudes, and we sat in my really grim bedroom at a hotel, and he had this list of coin-op games, and he was like, hey, Dominic, for like a AAA game, we're talking $250,000. And if it's like a AA game, it's got to be $100,000, And that's how we grade things. So, you got to get in the game, you got to be here, you got to put the money down. I thought we didn't actually have that sort of money to put down and risk. And I said, oh, no, I can't do that. And he was like, hey, Dominic, come on, you got to be in the. Oh, God. I said, look, what have you got? He goes to this list, and eventually he comes down and he goes, Star Wars. I'm like, oh, Star Wars. And you go, what do you mean, Star Wars, Spar Wars? I mean, come on, it's 10 years old. Nobody does that anymore. I'm like, no, Mandy. Atari, Star Wars coin-op game. I've played it many times. You sit in this thing and you go this vector graphic, kind of shoot the TIE fighters, and then you go down the hole and shoot you. The brilliant little vector graphic game. Great fun. I said, and ideal for home computers. I'm like, I want that. He's like, oh, you're killing me. No, damn it, it's not going to work. I'm like, how much, man? How much? He goes, oh my God. All right, 25,000. I said, done. And I said, I'll take the other two, Empire Strikes Back and Jedi as well. So anyway, he said, fine. Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. So I get the rights and we blaze it across CTW, Computer Trade Weekly, of course, those days, the games magazine, that we've got the rights to Star Wars. And I get a call from Rod Cousins. And Rod Cousins, who, if anybody doesn't know who's listening, they probably don't, Rod Cousins famously was head of Activision Europe back in the 80s, then Acclaim. Then, actually, he was a Codemasters, sold Codemasters, and it was the Jagex for a while, and he's now, put his feet up a little bit, but he's been immensely successful games guru in our industry. And
we had him on the podcast a couple of years ago. Lovely guy.
He's a lovely guy. He's full of great stories, by the way. From great stories. It's about time you had him on again. Anyway, so Rod rings me up. And he goes, oh, Dominic, Rod, look, I've got a programmer who sent me some, code of Star Wars. We don't want it, but, I'll put him in touch. I said, yes, Rod, absolutely. So this guy called Jürgen Friedrich, young student, really, from Germany, but obviously, absolutely brilliant. And he came over, we got him over, we paid his flight, he came over, and he showed us a sort of demo, and we said, can you do it on Spectrum, Commodore, Amiga, ST, PC? and he was like, oh, yes, I think I can do that, but I would have to be here in London. And we didn't want to kind of get a flat or anything. So believe it or not, he took a bedroom and bathroom at the very top of my parents' house in Wimbledon. Right. So, he literally lived with my parents. Every day he'd come down and they'd feed him, I guess.
Practically part of the family then.
He was. He was, Jürgen. And for about 5 months. It wasn't that long in those days. Things get, now it would take 7 years to make a game, but in those days it was pretty quick. And he banged these things out, and they were excellent. It was a perfect copy of the Atari game. So we put it out again, November, I'm going to say 85, 86, 87, somewhere. And it goes out and boom, number one, absolutely across the, and the checks are pouring in. Now, bear in mind that our advance to Atari was $25,000. And now it's November, December, boom. The first quarter, okay, the first quarter is effectively the final quarter of the year. So we total it up and we've made a lot of money. I think we had to pay 20% royalty to Atari. And we cut them a check for something like $570,000. and then you got to get this check. And I get this phone call from a guy called Randy Browlight. And he's like, hey, is that Dominic? Yes. Dominic, who are you? And we're like, well, where does this little games company? He's like, we need to come and see you. Like, are you doing anything next week? I'm like, not really, no. Like, okay, all right. Well, we'll see you Tuesday. Bye. And these three Atari executives, Becky DePue, Randy Browlight, and Dan Van Elderen. See, my memory is still pretty good.
Yeah, good.
Dan Van, these three dudes turned up at our doorstep with our little tiny, company office. And they're like, what did you do? And we're like, well, we did that. Anyway, we go out for lunch, we go out for dinner, blah, blah, blah. By the end of their stay, they're like, we want you to do every Atari coin-op conversion. And that was it. From then on, every arcade game they put out, we did the home computer version. And it was a rich seam of creativity. And of course, these games were well known. So you're pretty sure to make your money back on the cost of making the home computer version. And it produced a line of product, which was along with other stuff that we did. Fantastic. So that's how we got in with Atari.
Well, obviously, I mean, you're making a lot of product by this time, and I know that you, because originally you mentioned that you're kind of outsourcing the game programming, but then you brought it in-house with, I know there's the Kremlin team, is that right? Kind of your in-house programming team? Tell us a bit about how that was set up then, and how did it change your company bringing that in-house?
So one of our guys, he was a programmer actually, and a sort of producer as well, was a guy called John Kavanagh. And he was a young Irish guy. He'd come over to Britain. He was born in Limerick, but he'd come over. He was very bright, and he was doing some internal stuff. And he worked for us. He was sort of a techie guy, right? And we had dinner one night in an Indian restaurant opposite the office called Samrat in Putney. Super, best Indian in London. And he was complaining that we would, waste all this money by giving it to outsourcing people. We should have our own team and blah, blah, blah. He was droning on and on and on about it, okay? And I'm trying to dig into my prawn biryani, which if anybody ever in London, Putney wants a really good prawn biryani, the Samrat is the place to go. And I said to him, right, John, go set it up. Set up a team. And he looked at me like, what? I said, yeah, set up a team. So he went, okay. So that was the birth of Kremlin, and he got a whole lot of programmers together and artists and everything else. And we started doing a lot of the Atari game conversions effectively in the Kremlin. And it was in, I believe, Chertsey, mostly because he lived somewhere near there. So he put it at the office near, and they churned out stuff. That was the first of our in-house studios.
Well, you ended up moving to the US in 1992 and set up a US division of Domark. What was your inspiration to move there, and what memories stand out for you at that time? Okay,
so in those days, most of the Americans in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, most Americans were operating in America, but they were starting to open up their UK or European offices like Electronic Arts and so on. And we, up until that point, had done sort of swapsies. So, for example, we distributed Broderbund games. Okay, every game that they did, we would replicate over here into Europe, translate manuals and things, and then we would put it out, okay, and distribute it, and then send them a check. And they actually would take our games, like Star Wars and stuff like that. They would take our PC and they would publish it over in the States and then send us a check. So we thought, well, God, write it on the wall. And I said, look, if we don't have an office in America and control our own products, and we're going to be at a disadvantage, and it probably ended badly. So I said to Mark, look, you continue to run this kind of European side, and of course a lot of the development games. I will go and set up in the US. And I took, fun enough, John Kavanagh, the guy who who'd set up our studios, because we were great friends, and because actually I needed a good techie guy. And so the two of us literally got our visas and we went out and set up our Domark sort of US office. And we did do distribution deals with people like Spectrum, Holobyte, and indeed Atari did our cartridges, because, of course, cartridge business is very capital intensive. You have to pay $10 a cartridge. I mean, now it's a disc, but or if it's physical goods. But in those days, $10 a cartridge. 3 months beforehand, you've got to pay the money. Then Sega or Sony or Nintendo would then send you actually not Sony, but Sega or Nintendo would send you the 200,000 cartridges, and then you'd sell them, and then you get the money back after 90 days from the retailers. So the cash flow was absolutely horrendous. We needed partners with deep pockets to take us to market, but we needed to be there to do the marketing and selling and make sure that the buyers at Toys R Us and Walmart and everybody knew who we were. So that was the idea. So it was very small to start with, but gradually I started hiring people. And in the end, really, after 3 or 4 years, that the US office really was running the whole show.
Well, talking around that time as well, the early 90s, there was obviously a massive series of games that started then, the Championship Manager games. I know the first one developed by Intelec that Domark published. What are your memories of that project then, and kind of how did that relationship start?
So Championship Manager came in, along with lots of other games, into our sort of test room. And when someone said to me, oh, we got this football management game, I'm like, there's so many of them, and it's a really hard market, and and I really wasn't terribly interested. But then my finance director came in, and he said, a guy called Jeremy Bard, he said, Dominic, there's this game, this championship management game, and literally people are not leaving the office, right? They're staying at late, and they're playing, and they're all sitting around, they're all playing it. It's got to be something there. So I said, oh, God, right. So I went and had a look, and I didn't understand it at all because, first of all, I'm not really a football fan. I know. But, there's one of us. There's one of us who's not mad about football. And I didn't really get it. And also, of course, it wasn't lots of lovely graphics. It was just this kind of, all this text. You place your bets, and then you see how the outcome of the game, and then you win or you lose. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't really look great. But all right, fine. Everyone will say, you got to do it. So we get the Collier brothers down, right? These are two brothers. They're at university, and they come down. And we pay for them. We had to pay for them, the train ticket to come down. And they come into my office. They're lovely guys. And I'm like, two students, haven't got a bean, and I don't know about this game. So I'm going to have to offer the very smallest upfront money for a game that I've ever contemplated. £5,000. Well, they thought it was a fortune, of course. They were like, what? £5,000? I couldn't believe it. So anyway, we then, got them to finish it. And we went to an agency where they specialized in ugly people, like models who are ugly people. And we got this ugly guy to stand with a camel hair coat, with a cigar in one hand and jabbing his finger at the camera, right, as a kind of coach. What had that? I mean, those days, most football coaches were just nasty, ugly, pig-ugly kind of nasty people. Now they all look like movie stars, but those days, well, not all, but some of them. And we thought that will be exactly the sort of manager that we look for. So we put him on the front of the box, and we put it out, and we sold that at a couple of thousand units, and then we got a phone call from, Leisuresoft, can we have another 3,000 units, and send us off rang, and they wanted 5,000 units. We waited, that doesn't happen. And then the next week it was like 10,000, and we're going, what's happening here? And it didn't go out with a big bang. It kind of erupted like a volcano. And now we're busy trying to make enough for the demand, and it's going completely crazy. And of course, again, these two lads, right? Their first royalty check. I mean, I think it was at least, I'm thinking it was £70,000 or £80,000 for their first, couple of months royalties. And of course I said, come and celebrate, come down. And they turned up with this brand new Golf GTI, and they were bouncing up and down. They were so excited, and they came bouncing in, and so anyway, it went on. They made a lot of money. We made a lot of money. And of course, Championship Manager 2 came out, and it had its problems actually. Champ 2 because they were very inexperienced, really, and there were a lot of. It was quite ambitious. There were a lot of bugs, a lot of complaints. I mean, if we were on Steam now, it would have been mixed to negative. The thumb would be definitely in the orange, and it was a real. But we gradually sort of reversed that, and then of course the rest is history. It just became the biggest selling football management game of all time, and it definitely helped build our reputation as a publisher, and added a lot of money to us. So the corollary to the story is that, believe it or not, Matt Woodley, the winner of Eureka Prize, became a marketing director, whatever it was, of Sega. Around about, I'm going to say 98, 99, he was in place, and he was luring the Collier brothers away. I think their company at that point had been changed to Sports Interactive, and this very happy relationship. I had left, by the way, at this point, so I wasn't anything to do with Eidos anymore, but Domark struck Eidos, and Matthew managed to persuade them to go to Sega, and Sega bought them, and that's why Sports Interactive is now a division, and the Collier brothers worked with that division for Sega, and now it's Player Manager. Well, it's called Player Manager because I owned the rights to Championship Manager because we kept the name for us. They had the game, the code, that was their copyright. Well, our copyright was the name. Now, for some reason, and this is way after I left Eidos, the idiots who eventually looked after Eidos didn't have it a gumption to be able to say, look, we'll give you the name Championship Manager, just give us like 1-2%, make something out of it, because we weren't going to do anything with it. They tried to do something with it, but it's pointless. I mean, these boys, these colleges, they were so fanatical about football. I mean, even over lunches, I mean, you couldn't really talk about anything else. And I didn't know much about football. But if I said, how's your father? They'd say, my father's really, really well because, Manchester United won against Tokyo. Like, they couldn't talk about anything else. But which is, of course, why it's so good. It's because they're so passionate and so detailed. And the difference between Champ Manager, people usually say, what's the difference? And the answer is the algorithm, because they would attribute 20 different kind of, features like the speed, tackling, dribbling, shooting, whatever it is, for every single player, right across all the leagues, all the divisions, or whatever it was in those days, to a very, very, very accurate degree. They literally knew every single player. I mean, thousands. And they would give them these attributes and put them into so that when you built your teams, or you had a team against another team, it was very accurate. He does always trip over his feet before he actually, gets to the goal. That's exactly what that dude does. I recognize that because they would have accurately defined that attribute to him. And that's why people found it so perfect. And in very few other companies have managed to get to that level.
You did touch on there the change to Eidos. Now, I'm interested in that story because, that was around 1994. I read that happened. And you met Charles Cornwall, who was the chairman of Eidos. I'm quite interested in the background of like who Eidos were, because I heard they were like a small company that were making video compression software for like the Acorn Archimedes. I mean, how did that relationship start, and how did that end up becoming basically a reverse takeover and Domark becoming Eidos? What kind of happened?
Well, exactly as you say. So I was introduced to Charles Cornwall by a mutual friend who was also an investor in Domark, had been from the very beginning, actually. He was a city guy, very, very powerful, successful, rich city guy. And he introduced me to Charles because he'd come across him, and Charles was chairman and bought into this little AIM, one is USM in those days, but equivalent of AIM, a kind of little company, which had raised £1 million to do data compression technology. In those days, obviously, your landlines were taking data, and it was terribly slow. And the idea was if you could divide packets into little easy-to-send packets and compress the data, which would then open the other end, as a full thing, you could get a lot more speed and a lot more data done. So data compression technology was really, really quite the thing. To be honest, now, I mean, it's still a thing, but it's with fiber. You don't need it in the same way that people did in those days. So it was the right idea, and they sat in a little office trying to do this data compression technology to be able to sell it to, I don't know, whoever. And of course, they would not actually be able to sell it to anybody. It was very, very pregnant with hope, but it wasn't actually translating into sales. So small market cap of not very much, $600,000-700,000 in the bank, okay, because they were hardly spending the money that they raised, because only about 3 or 4 of them. And there were no Ferraris in the car park, and lots of hope, but nothing actually happening. And Charles bought it because what he saw was a little nothing company that probably could act as a shell with some cash in it for something proper. So when we got together, he said, look, you want capital, you want to grow your business. It's difficult to necessarily go public out the box, but if you reverse into Eidos, Domark reverses into Eidos, you've got a real business, turning over millions of pounds and all the rest of it, and lots of people. We'll put it into this business, and that will be the new business that Eidos will go to. And that was how it began. And clearly, I was not that au fait with the city and how you raise money or float companies. So it's very helpful having somebody who did know how that worked and who to talk to. Since then I've floated probably 5-6 companies, and I've got loads of mates in the city who are fund managers and brokers and blah, 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 blah. So, there's no mystery now. But if I had known then what I know now, I would have needed all this, but I certainly did at the time. And we reversed in. I mean, it was actually in September, I believe it was September 95, when we finally consummated that and became listed on the London Stock Exchange. And a lot of other people had bought shares when it was a nothing, not worth anything kind of company. And suddenly their shares became worth huge amounts of money.
They were very happy.
They didn't want to hit them. They didn't want to hit them. I mean, admittedly, also my shareholders, my mother had money and my father had put 10 grand to show good faith when we were kicking off back in the mid-'80s. So it was exactly sort of 10 years later. And there were people who I hadn't seen since the day I got to. I had 2 Morgan Grenfell bankers over a hamburger in Fulham wrote out checks for £10,000 each and handed it to me over as I was squeezing the old tomato sauce on my burger. I didn't see them for 10 years, right? And then I get phone calls and they're like, what on earth did you just do? I've got like £500,000 worth of shares. What did you do? So it was quite fun when we went public, and everybody was successful. So it was great.
I think you had so many companies involved as well, because Big Red Software got involved, Center Gold, Core Designs, US Gold as well, and you were expanding very fast.
Yes,
I was wondering what it was like when Tomb Raider hit then, and you saw it for the first time. How crazy it went then.
Right. So yes, you're right. When we went public, so start with the Big Red. Yep. So Paul Ransom, fantastic guy. I loved him like a brother. He'd done some games which we'd published, so I bought that company and him, and he got a nice check. He was delighted. It changed his life. And then the other company was a company called Simis, Flight Sims, and we published all the flight sims that they'd ever done in Baverstock, and Jonathan Newth, terrific guys. I had actually pub lunch with them only a week ago. Wonderful guys. And so we bought them. So we bought a couple of studios to pad it out. And then in the following year, so now we're moving the clock forward into 96. It's about, I'm going to say it's February, maybe March, and Charles rings me up. And he says, so he says, Dominic, there's a company called Center Gold, and I think we should buy them. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's Jeff Brown's outfit, right? Centresoft and of course US Gold, and together they called it Center Gold. It was listed on the stock exchange. It had some problems. It had been not very profitable. The share price was in the tank, and it really wasn't worth very much. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. I said, I think the US Gold piece is the piece we want. I don't think we want Centresoft. I think it's a distribution company. It's logistical. It's like you got to, you make 5p on every box. It's just not our style. We just don't do that. So I said, if we can sell Centresoft to the management and keep the US Gold bit, then yeah, let's buy US Gold. So he goes and we make a bid. It's like 15 million quid, and we buy Center Gold. We sell Centresoft off for I think £8 million to Roger Swindell's and his team, and then the other piece of it, which is the US Gold publishing piece of it, we take over. They have the Olympic license, and they were working on this sort of thing. And then now we're in E3 territory, because the CES shows are now a thing of the past. It's all about E3. The industry is big enough to host its own dedicated show in Los Angeles. And I've got a big stand, and I got all my boys and girls, and stuff is happening. It's very chaotic. And the first day, I handed a whole lot of material that's just come in from the UK. And one of them is a videotape, and it's got Tomb Raider written on it. And I'm like, okay. And I'm initially, I'm like, oh, sounds like a kind of Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of knockoff. It's like, this is kind of cheesy. So anyway, I put it on. Kind of got all the salespeople, all our sort of reps, all the grungy old reps out of New York, seen it all, been there, done it. I mean, they're always miserable. They most of them repped for toy companies as well. And if you've ever come across anybody who reps for a toy company, they are literally one of the most miserable creatures on earth. I mean, they just go. I don't know why. It's just anyway. They're all looking, grumpy. And I put this thing on. And I go, okay, so we've got this new game coming in this year, it's cool, and it's going to be actually on PC and PlayStation, which has just come out the year before. And Lara, she's running and her ponytail is swinging behind her, and she dives into this kind of underground kind of pool and a tomb, and and I'm looking at it, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. It's like a fantastic character, great animation, and then she turns around and she winks. I mean, she literally winks at that, at us. We're watching it, and that's the end of the trailer. And I'm like, oh, and these guys are clapping. Right, they're all applauding. They're like, wow, they're all and they never applaud. And I'm like, a warm glow came across my chest, because, oh, God, we've got something here. So I go back onto the stand. I'm like, right, we need to do all these things. Take that down, take that down. I want posters of, Tomb Raider. I want more tape, get some more tapes cut, and we can put them into the loops that go round and round and round on the teddy screens and so forth. And Eidos, Domark, in fact, originally, but Eidos were famous for their show parties. We were always shut down by the fire marshals. There was always drama and intoxication involved in our parties, and we were famous for it. And everybody used to try and get in, and it was always a nightmare and great fun. And that night, we had exactly that. We had a huge party in a big nightclub we'd taken over, and a fantastic country rock and roll band at one end. I can see the drummer now. He was one of those dudes who can bang the drumsticks on the thing, and it goes in the air and come down, and he catches them. And then he'd bounce it off his heel and catch it and back. Incredible guy. And everybody was coming up to me going, damn, Tomb Raider. I saw that in a stand. It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. And literally everybody was talking about it. And I knew that we had something.
Yeah, I mean, that was just a complete game changer. No pun intended, when that game came out, wasn't it? It was just the biggest thing in the world, and obviously continues to this day, still a huge franchise. A couple of years after that, though, in 1997, that kind of marked the end of your era at the company. You left in 97. I mean, what kind of motivated that then, and how did it feel leaving behind the company that you'd co-founded a decade before?
Yeah, it's I think there are a few things that combined, really. I think the first one was, to be frank, the boat had come in, and I was quite tired. I mean, admittedly, I was only about 35 or 36, but it'd been a long 10 years, and it'd been so many ups and downs. So many moments where we got close to bankruptcy, and then suddenly, rabbit was pulled out of the hat. It was quite weary. And the fact that we managed to lumber through, and we were almost the last man standing. And bear in mind, I mean, all the other great names from that era are pretty much gone. I mean, Domark stroke Eidos is about the only one that's still a name in a way. I mean, all now owned by Embracer, but yeah. And I felt that. And the other thing was that I think Charles and his thoughts and ideas and some people that he brought in on the board had a different set of ambitions to me. I wanted just to focus on building a games company. And Charles was like buying record labels, and he was buying, CGI studios in Soho. And he was sort of, he was like a sailor who'd just come into port. He was sort of buying everything. And I felt that we were going to end up probably falling out. And there was no point, and I just didn't feel like a fight really over it. Also, my wife wanted to bring the children, 2 little children. They'd grown up in California. They were entirely American. They spoke American. And we had to kind of make a decision. They're sort of 7, 8 years old now, and I want to get to take back to bring them up in England, rather than leaving them back. So she wanted to go back to England. We'd done 5 years. And the boat had come in, and I just thought, leave them laughing. I'm done here, and I'll take some time off, and then, see what happens. So that's really when I left in 97, and we ended up in France, and then we went obviously back to England, and we sort of mooched around. So it was the end of an era, really, and I just went on quite strongly. Obviously, mostly because of Tomb Raider. There are some crazy stories that came out, and I was obviously, because my guys, my old friends, like my McGarvey and of course Kavanagh and others who were still there, I'd meet with them for dinner and so on in London. I get all the stories of craziness. So there was a whole book to be written about Eidos in those years, but eventually, of course, it fell into the arms of Square Enix. Who bought it, and then that was it. That was the end of the public-held company that effectively I founded. And but it still exists today in some form, and as I say, Embracer now own it, and some of these great franchises. But no, I don't regret leaving. Sometimes you finish your business and you go, that's it, on to the next.
And obviously your career has continued, very strong in the gaming industry. I mean, you're still involved today, aren't you? What do you do now?
So I became chairman of Kuju, which was a spin out of Simis, because I think Ian Baverstock and Jonathan Hughes sort of felt the same way as I did, and as soon as they could get out, they did. And I became chairman of that in the early 2000s, and I floated it, I think, about 2004, maybe 5. And I had other non-executive directorships, and I had various projects. I mean, I did some property, all the sort of things that you sort of muck about. And then we were approached by a company called Catalyst. It's a German company listed at the stock exchange in Frankfurt, run by a couple of German guys, and they wanted to buy Kuju out of the London Stock Exchange for cash. And it was a good offer. We said, all right. So they approached me and said, look, would you like to come on the board at Catalyst? And as a non-executive, I'm like, yeah, okay. So I was chairman of Kuju underneath Catalyst and on the board of Catalyst. And the only other thing it was supposed to be a buy and build. It was supposed to be like a keywords. I mean, that was the idea that the Germans had, buy and build services to the kit. But actually, the only thing they had was Testronic, which was a film and television testing company in Hollywood, right? Nothing to do with games. And then this game making company, which is it was a work for hire studio, 350 people, blah, blah, blah. But doing games for Ubisoft and Activision and so on. And so, these two things were going together. Then we had a very disastrous time. I will delicately say that it had something to do with management, without necessarily pointing the finger in exactly the direction. But nevertheless, management. And they asked me to take over in 2012, 11, 12. And I hadn't actually run anything since Eidos. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm the chief executive of another company. Well, what time do they start work? Is it still 9:30? Great, okay, fine. So I went to see my wife. She was lounging by the pool in France. And I said, I think I might be going back to work, like proper work. And she's like, oh, well, good, get out and make some proper money. So that's it. I took it over, and it was basically, we owed 12 million euros to KBC Bank in Brussels, which somebody had borrowed, and we were in deep. I can't say the word. But we were in it deep. Doo-doo. That's it. That's the one. And it was almost a mission impossible. Okay, because the bank want the money back. They're banging on the door. They're about to pull us down. And I had these two. Kuju had suffered from lack of games, to make, because there was a lot of biz dev. And Testronic was in the film, television testing, DVDs and stuff. It was kind of small business, and so I had no time at all, but I had to figure out what to do. And the way I dealt with it was that I turned Testronic into a games testing company, right? So I went to Poland, threw out a couple of floors, borrowed some desks and tables and stuff, and we started testing games. The first client was Riot and Rovio and people like that. So suddenly, money started to come in on that side of the division. With Kuju, I got Gary Bracey, who's wonderful, wonderful guy, and a great sales guy. And he was at a loose end at the time that I rang, thank goodness. And I said, what are you doing, Gary? He said, well, not very much. I said, well, come meet me this afternoon for a drink at Canazoro Park. And he turned up, and I basically had a nice chat. And about an hour and a half later, we'd agreed that he would join us. And he was on a plane to Seattle to see Microsoft on the Monday morning. So it was like, we didn't have any time to waste, basically. We needed stuff. And gradually we got more gigs for Kuju and money. So, cash started to come into the company instead of bleeding out. And I went back to the bank and said, okay, we've noticed that we've started to put money in. Now, I've got a plan to pay it back. And I basically did a big presentation. It was make or break. The Germans came with me as non-executives, and these 4 very grumpy Belgian bankers were looking at us, They thought they'd lost their money. We were in the bad bank, the recovery bit, where they get big bonuses, by the way, for everything that they get back out of something they think is gone. And anyway, 3 of them said yes, 1 of them said no, but the ayes have it. So they sort of reluctantly agreed, but I did pay €250,000 a month to them. And by 15, we'd paid everything back. Much to their surprise. They literally, so, a relief, and presumably, trebles all round, right? Their bonuses must have been fantastic. And it was very, very, very hard work. And it was nail biting because anything could go wrong. But we just squeaked through. And as soon as I was able to keep the money that we were making from, of course, Testronic, which by that stage started to really grow quite big. And of course, we started to keep the money. Then we could start to expand and do something. And the first thing I did was to buy Curve Games, which was a small, perfectly formed, digital-only game company on Steam and, of course, PlayStation and Xbox, and very, very small, but needed a little bit of money and perhaps a bit of guidance to get it in, and I only bought it for a very small amount of money, but it's got on to great things, and of course things like Human Fall Flat sold 45 million copies on its own, and The Ascent, and of course For the King 2, which just come out, it's a huge hit. So. We've built that come out. And Testronic now is well over 2,000 people. I mean, I can't remember the last count. It's like 2,300 people across the globe, from Manila to Bucharest to Belgrade to Lisbon to Madrid. And it's all over the world now, and a very great success of company.
Well, Dominic, you've had an incredible history in the industry, and I feel like we've crammed in so much into that last hour, and it's incredible to hear that the passion still burns strong and you're still involved, at this level today as well. And obviously I'll link up, the Curve Games website and Testronic if people want to kind of check out the catalogue and hopefully purchase some of the games as well.
Indeed.
So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and do some reminiscing with us. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Well, a great pleasure, and it's quite fun to relive these memories because your questions sort of spark memories. I'm quite surprised that I can remember all these names and places, but there we are.
You've done well.
It's been a trip down memory lane.